Well, thank you, everybody. Welcome to the Q&A for Rez Metal. My name is Ernie Quiroz, programmer for Cine Las Americas. I am proud to have the filmmaker, producer, director, wore many hats on the film, Ash Soltani Stone. Ash, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation.
Um, talk about talk about metal music on the Navajo reservation. When people think of heavy metal, they don't think of the Navajo reservation. When they think of the reservation, they don't think of metal music necessarily. So how did this music come to be? You have a book called Rez Metal too. So how did this project all happen?
It's interesting because that was exactly what was my impression when I read that tiny little article on New York Times about like 5 or 6 years, 5 years ago. That talks about that has that future interview with Edmund Niazi as a councilman, who actually is also featured in the film, and he talks briefly about his band, and he briefly talks about the popularity of heavy metal scene, and it's very interesting because he's a conservative councilman, but he's also a drummer for a heavy metal band called Testify with his son and a few other people. As I mentioned, they are also part of the film. So and that was exactly what got my attention. I remember I just finished another music documentary before that, and I was interested about pursuing another music documentary, but I want to do something a little bit more focusing on a diverse population, and something extraordinary, something that you don't hear more. And when I heard about the story, when I read that article on New York Times, immediately got my attention. And I remember like 10 minutes later, I was frantically trying to reach out to the councilman. And while I was like, please, please, I hope nobody else is working on this documentary because it's such a great topic. And I was like hoping that I'm the first one who's actually going to pursue that. And I was very fortunate about these things. And that was the story. That's how it ended. He graciously invited me to Navajo Nation, and he showed me around. He actually I went to the rehearsal, we went to a few show in this venue called Juggernaut, which is in Gallup. I don't know if you're familiar with Gallup, New Mexico. Very, very interesting place. And that's the whole thing started. And it's very interesting. I didn't really meet my I Don't Conform, which is the main characters in this film, Kyle, till my second trip, because they were not the focus on the documentary to begin with.
So how did you meet Kyle? How did all that happen?
Very interesting. Well, on my second, another person who was very helpful to me was this young lady. Her name was Kimberly Benchman, and she does these things called Navajo Metal Promotion. And she's a Navajo herself. She lives in Flagstaff, and she's trying to maybe organize concerts, promote different bands, put together compilation CDs. Very, very, hardworking and great mission. So I reached out to her on my second trip, and she said, "Oh, I'm gonna be there. I'm gonna take you to some shindigs and some shows." And my goal was really making a film about the whole scene. Really, it wasn't focusing on a central character. So on the way to a concert, which I don't even know, I think was way out there, because for a lot of those concerts you have to drive 2 or 3 hours because it's just the middle of nowhere. She insisted if we can stop by at this place called Fort Defiance to meet this band that she really, really liked. And I really didn't want to go because I was ready to go and I just want to get to the concert and film and all that stuff. But she kept insisting. I'm like, "Oh, okay, let's go just stop by and check those guys up." And I went over there and they were like inside this little Zumba place in the middle of this repair shit, middle of nowhere. And it actually is also in the film as well. And they were ready to go and they got me. And as soon as they played, it really hit me. And I'm not a musician or like a biggest heavy metal fan person. I'm a rock and roll person, but heavy metal is not necessarily wasn't my favorite things on that time. But when I listened to their music, there was something special about it. And also Kyle. Uh, Kyle, when I talked to him, he was a very charismatic and articulate, young man. And you could tell that he's searching for something larger. So a month later, I did some filming with them. Still wasn't thinking this is gonna be my main characters. A month later, I received a call from Kyle, talking about his communication with legendary rock and roll producer of Metallica's Fleming Rasmussen, who is credited for producing the iconic Metallica songs such as Master of Puppets, Blackened, Light Fire, and a bunch of other important Metallica's songs. And he told me that that he's been in communication with him, and they send him the demo reel, and he is very interested about pursuing this. And when I heard that story, something a bulb went on immediately, and I'm just like, this is something that's gonna be really interesting, because in every documentary, we always, at least in my case, I'm always looking for that central characters, that characters that's gonna drive the stories and kind of glue everything together. For some reason, I have a difficult time when I'm making a documentary about like a scene and not necessarily having a characters around that scene. So I think it was a blessing for me to meet those guys. And then the rest is a feature-length film called Rez Metal, which took us around 4.5, 5 years to produce, and here we go.
Yeah, no, Kyle and the band is a wonderful entry point, like you said, into that whole subculture. Talk about, you said you're not a musician, but talk about sort of your musical background and for all intents and purposes, I mean, you're not Navajo, you're an outsider, and sort of how you were welcomed in the community and how you built that trust.
Very good point. I think I think being an outsider myself, and also being preoccupied with some of the same things, struggling with understanding the same thing that a lot of people, who are from the underrepresented and minority dealing with, such as being pigeonholed and always dealing with a certain narrative that's associated with you. I'm a Middle Eastern man. I was born in Iran, and whenever you hear about Middle Eastern man, either they're terrorists, sexists, and all that stuff. You hear. I mean, unfortunately, there's this or other. Maybe hopefully things gonna get better. But for many years, especially post September 11, that was the first thing. Every film is most about these issues, or even if they want to defend that, it was about defending them about this. And for me, as a scholar, as somebody who really believes in the humanity in all of us. For me, it was always very difficult, because everywhere you go and you want to connect with people, the first thing they ask you a lot of time is where you're coming from. And as soon as they hear where you're coming from, they start interacting with you in through that curious lens, which sometimes could be a little bit offensive. And I know they a lot of time they don't necessarily mean that. A lot of time it's just about curiosity, and they and sometimes maybe well intended. But it becomes a little bit tiresome when you constantly being studied, being being referred to through a certain lens, or a certain predisposed narrative. And I think that's something was my one of the goals that I was about this film was to tell the story about a bunch of musicians who actually trying to break away and leave their marks, but that happened to takes place on the Navajo reservation, like many other rock and roll movement or genre and artists, who there's definitely a strong a relation with their surrounding and with their environments, and that's you cannot really overlook. And I think that's something that maybe really connect us, that I told them from the beginning, I'm not here to make another sad film about, and I know all about this. I mean, I could have easily gone to that direction, suicide, mass poverty, and all that stuff. which is there, and I cannot deny the existence of it. But for me, what really interested me, how human spirit, how art can help us to transcend those difficult those hardship, and in this case heavy metal music, how it's going to help them to deal with that issues. So at the end of it, I want to make a rock and roll film that takes place on the Navajo reservation, and I think that's something really connect us. I think we had the same language when we talk about our concerns or similar experience, and also or similar or shared humanity. I think that's something really connected us together, and also the fact that for me, maybe because of my I live with my subjects. I don't go just with the camera. I go and live. I go spend a lot of time without my camera because it's very important for me to bond. And I think one of the great things about this film is that even if it's done, I feel I have an extended family on the Navajo reservation, which is very unique in this film because this is usually not the case with a lot of other films. But in this particular film, I'm always looking forward to just go there to reconnect with a lot of my friends that I met throughout this film.
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, you're talking about years in the process of making the film and the book. So I think that goes a long way for them to not feel like maybe they're being exploited. That you're just there to sort of cash in.
No, and I think that talking about the book briefly, the book wasn't first. The book is a byproduct of the film because the film, we spent a lot of time interviewing different bands and spiritual leaders and all that stuff about the heavy metal and how it's the importance of it, the impacts of it on the society and the youth culture. Unfortunately, they didn't fit into the film because the film suddenly became very character driven. And I had to make, but I really didn't want to, not to do anything with those material. So that's why, we decided to actually, publish a book based on those interviews and also feature those bands that didn't. And on top of that, all the proceed for this book, it's going to this organization called Native American Music Foundation, which they are providing instruments and free music workshop for the Navajo kids on the Navajo Nation's Museum on the Window Rock. So every Sundays. So I think fam, please, if you buy it, not going to my pocket. Whoever listens to it, it's going to be really supporting those children, and buying instruments, for,
that's great
for those kids. Yeah. So I think that was the whole thing.
Yeah. Talk about there's a little bit of this in the film, and you alluded to the fact that tribal leaders, elders, have sort of embraced heavy metal, which I think is a big shift in certainly growing up. I'm a child of the 80s, and I remember in the 80s, everyone, the satanic panic and metal music was the devil's music, and it scared the old people. Talk a little bit about that shift in the mindset.
Absolutely. I think there's a division still happening. I think especially the much older generation, usually like the grandparents of these musicians in their 70s, anybody over 65, they still hold a negative view towards heavy metal music as a Satan's work and everything. Although I met a few spiritual leader who actually very much embracing this music, and one thing that you hear that they not necessarily like the music, but they understand what this music is doing for these young kids. Bring them together, find a way, because there's nothing to do. There's nothing to do on the Navajo reservation. It's just, I call them like a fourth ward. It's even not a third ward. There's just absolutely, there's nowhere to go. There's nothing, except music, or I don't know what else. And I think so they understand this one. But also the parents of these musicians in their 50s and 60s, a lot of these kids also grew up in the rock and roll radio station, which, in that time, either have the country, the preachers, or a classic rock radio stations. And of course, they didn't want to listen to Hank Williams or things like that, which I don't mind Hank Williams. But one of the things you hear a lot of the parents is they grew up listening to rock and roll, and Pink Floyd and this and that. So their kids, their children were exposed to that type of music on that time. Edmond Yazzie, the counterman.
Didn't Kyle's mom? Didn't Kyle's mom get the headphones?
Yes. She's a total metalhead. She's a total rock and roll, and she's actually in the film as well. So she dresses like a heavy metal, and the whole family. And you see a lot of middle-aged people are wearing like their Metallica, AC/DC, and Eddie Van Halen, and all that stuff everywhere. I mean, I haven't seen that many metalheads in my life that I see on the Navajo reservation. So I think that is what really connect and give and prepare for this new generation of heavy metal musician. One thing that also I think really contributes to popularity of heavy metal music, and I think I mentioned to another interview, and I'm not a musician, but I know a little bit that punk and heavy metal is a two genre of rock and roll that is pretty much DIY. I mean, you can actually start jamming. Doesn't mean you're good, but you can just get the instrument and start jamming and put something together. It's not classical music. It's not acoustic guitar that you have to go through rigorous training. You can actually get together and jam. And I think that also, and then also that connecting to the whole tradition of gathering and getting together, and then also the drum-driven aspects of traditional Navajo music, I think is really contributes to the rise of popularity of heavy metal music. As a matter of fact, the current president Jonathan Nez, who was a vice president then, and also features in the film, in several scenes, he's a metalhead, and we actually ended up going to Metallica's concert with him and Kyle and President Nez. In Phoenix. That was 2017, 18, something like that, whenever the last time they were over there. So it's just a very interesting things are happening over there.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said is that, you can be young, and if you have a passion for the music, you don't necessarily have to be good, but if you have a passion, and if you play with passion, then you can practice, and then you get better. You don't have to be good before you necessarily play. You just have to have that passion and the energy.
The 10,000 hours, that's what it is. If you don't have the passion, you're not gonna do that. Put that 10,000. And I think, it's funny because once I finished this film, I started actually playing acoustic guitar, like learning acoustic guitar and everything. And I don't have any, because this is something was my dream. Especially the last 2-3 documentary I did on music documentary, I'm like, I gotta do something. I'm gonna die, and and I can just tell. And I live in Los Angeles. I have a relatively okay jobs and all that stuff, and I just forget about everything. When I play for like half an hour, my wife and kids have to stop me. I'm like doing a couple of chords here and there, and I can only imagine, the importance of music, what that music can do for these kids who has nothing, just like poverty. And it's just a very, very important. I hope it continues.
Yeah. So mention what's the nonprofit music group again, and how can people? What's the website, or how to if they want to donate or help them out?
Well, I don't have that thing, but I can send you an email. But there's if you go to their Facebook page, I think they're called Native American Music Foundations. And also, if you go to Amazon and look at a book called Rez Metal, Inside the Navajo Nation Heavy Metal Scene, you will see you can actually buy it. And if you open the acknowledgement at the beginning, because it's free, it says all the proceeds goes to Native American Music Foundation. So there's 2 places that I encourage everybody to go and check and help those kids. I think that's very meaningful. And a lot of this band, a lot of the musicians, including Kyle and a bunch of other people, they go and volunteer and teach these kids how to play music. Yeah, so this is like amazing things that people are doing.
Any updates on Kyle or anybody else in the film? Like, sort of what have they been doing since the film?
Well, Kyle, the idea, the formation, I don't conform formation, fell apart. Although from the get-go, Kyle is the writer and the lead and everything. I mean, it's really his band. But I mean, of course, you cannot ignore the contribution of the other two. They're amazing. But I think because of the economical issue and Kyle has kids, he had to move to Phoenix to find a job because there's absolutely nothing in the reservations. And that's and because of that, I think the whole band fell apart. And I think the other issue is a lot of times if you are in a band and one person is such a very eager and driven, and the other one are not necessarily as much, I think that's that they see this is the best. So it's kind of be hard. So I think Kyle reformed the band with new musicians, the Navajo musicians, but they reside in Phoenix, so it's much easier for them to work together. He actually also got signed like 2-3 weeks ago by this independent British label. And I think they're supposed to, they have to. I mean, it took a long time, and that's what I'm very inspiring about the whole things with Kyle is like they keep going, they don't give up, they keep pressing, and even for me, it's something very inspiring. And usually, I'm very objective when it comes to the documentary, and try to detach myself, but it's been really inspiring for me how these guys are pushing and nothing really stops them. So they got to sign up with this British label. I forgot the name. And apparently they are going to start touring in Europe in November if everything goes okay.
Wow.
With the whole pandemic situation. Yeah, so they are going. And I know that Fleming Rasmussen, they've been in communication with Fleming about producing their second album, which I think I have great hopes for those guys. I think I think something's gonna happen for them. I mean, heavy metal, it's a very it's not the biggest market, as we all know, but I think they can get a decent amount of success. And being a working musician, working artist, I think it's a blessing for everybody who is in this field. Music, film, design, just an amazing.
Yeah. And then do you know how do they have a Facebook, or how can people stay up to date on them and on you and on the film on social media?
Absolutely, you can. Sure, you can actually go to. We have a Rez Metal Facebook and Instagram, and also there's a website that you can actually go and check. And you can also communicate with us through that website. There's a contact list that we can contact you. And then the band I Don't Conform, they have their own Facebook page, and they're very active and about people reaching out to them. And I really hope that people go and support them. Not only I Don't Conform, but all the Rez bands, because I Don't Conform is just one example of many great bands over there. And not only heavy metal. I'm talking about hip hop. One of them, Defi. He's a very prominent hip hop artist who's actually is kind of like as a narrates the film, kind of connects all different scenes in this film. Because when I listened to him, I was like, I have to have him. He's just amazing. Very charismatic. Hip hop is huge. I know there's some jazz musician on the Navajo reservation. EDM, it's electronic dance music. They do a lot of that on the. So there's a lot of things happening. Like they're great comic artists, and I think there's so many interesting things that is happening on the not only Navajo reservation but all the surrounding tribes and indigenous community in general, which I think is going to be a lot of room for exploration.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful. Yeah, we're sort of living in the digital age now with digital filmmaking, digital music, and more connected than ever with YouTube and TikTok and all these things. So it's great that all these kids are finding an outlet for for their passion and making it opportunities, because opportunities are hard on the res.
Oh, it is very. I really hope something happens. I hope something happens because it's tough. I mean, we lost in this film. I mean, this film was a very bittersweet film. I mean, I lost five. I mean, we lost five people that I know direct them to suicide or alcohol related issues in this film, and it's heartbreaking. Every time you go and you see people deteriorating, the situation is going worse. So I really hope something happens, and I hope this film does. I think more than my. I mean, it's one of those films that I think I heard my ego is beside all that stuff. I think for me, this film has a bigger mission than my own artistic ego or whatever. And I'm really hoping that it brings something, some grain of light, something, attention or something to. And that's what maybe that's why I think also I got very strong connection with the community because I was very passionate about it. And usually it's not the case in a lot of my
Yeah.
I'm very trying to catch.
Well, it's a very inspirational story. It's an empowering story. It's obviously about the power of music. So, yeah, I think people, and you're playing at festivals. Yeah, talk about other festivals and the film and maybe other projects that you're working on.
Yeah. So actually, well, the film is just starting. It's a festival around about a month ago, and it's already played in Milwaukee. Is playing at Las America, Las America, which I'm very, very excited. It's a really cool lineup. It's playing at Roxbury. It won the best documentary just today at the Big Apple Film Festivals. It's playing on Philadelphia Indie. And there's a bunch of them that we are hoping to get into. I'm really hoping to get to some more film festivals that is close to the indigenous community and the region, like Santa Fe, New Mexico, Arizona, the Four Corners, and Utah. So we will see. We will see what's going to happen. I think the next also is the distribution. That's something else that we are actually hoping to get for this film. I think it's a important stories for people to know. And I think we're talking about diversity. We're talking about inspiring stories, and I think this film has that without being over sensationalizing those issues. I think that's something that I try to do my best to remain as subtle as possible and let people digest themselves. I don't know how successful it was, but that was the idea behind making this film. And I think that's, and then eventually I'm hoping to have a short screening at Window Rock once the situations get more under control. Maybe something in Gallup, just more like on a private, just for the people.
Yeah. No, I think that's what really resonated with me and the other programmers is that, it didn't feel like it was exploitation. It didn't feel like it was just look at these poor people and sort of like capitalizing on that. It really provide, there's definitely you touch upon some tragedy, but you also provide hope, which was a really nice balance in the film.
Well, I think the landscape is really, I think, dictate me that approach, because this when I go over there, it's both hunting, but also it's extremely beautiful, and you have this two extreme competing feeling that's happening over here, and I think that's something maybe really what's behind this film. These two competing, strong emotions, and you're trying to strike the right balance. And that was the challenge.
Yeah. Real quickly before we wrap up, any projects that you're working on that you can talk about?
Sure. Yeah, I'm actually developing one project about called Future History of Farming and Humanities. It's a docu-series that focusing on the sustainable practices, but also the role of humanity, arts, and creativity to promoting the sustainable future, and also the racial justice in future. So it's very different from this project. I also have another plan, which is about rock and roll, the history of rock and roll in Bulgaria. Well, Bulgaria during the communist time and present time. The communist time, they had to deal with the rock and roll stars had to deal with the restriction of Communist Party. But now the next generation have to deal with the reality of capitalism, because Bulgaria is one of the most corrupt countries in the European Union, and freedom of speech is one of the lowest index over there, and because media is owned by 2 or 3 oligarchs, so that means you can't have you don't get enough share, only very bad pop music you can see. So same struggle continues. So it's going to be this little parallel story. And that's another project that I've been working for like 7-8 years. Wow. And, because I had like 3 projects in between I'm trying to juggle in between. So I'm hoping to get those 2 projects out. But you won't be surprised if I actually reach out to you in a couple of years with a completely different project. Because that's usually my tendency. I usually find something like, I got to finish this one and I go back to the other one. Yeah. But I'm hope I can deliver something in the next couple of years, 2 or 3 years, I would say. So sure. 3 years is actually pretty short for documentary.
That's pretty short. That's pretty quick for documentary, yeah. So
pretty short. Yeah, 3-4 years is pretty short. Yeah.
Well, definitely keep us posted. We'll keep an eye out on Rez Metal online and on Facebook, and Kyle and the film and your projects, and we'd love to welcome you to Austin and go have some barbecue and some beer after a screening.
I would love to. When is that? It's like in June, yeah?
We next year, we're not sure, but typically, yeah, we're in May and June. So we'll keep you updated, and you keep making films.
I will, and I hope to come to Austin and have some barbecue. I've never been to Austin, so I'm very excited.
Oh, well, perfect chance for you to come. So, okay, well, thank you so much for joining us. Take care, and for everyone, everyone watching, don't forget to vote. Film is eligible for the Audience Award, and again, thank you for watching, and enjoy the rest of the festival.